bring one thing up. I was following that Alec Murdaugh trial. I don't know if you know
I've
about
just read a
that,
couple
but
of
yeah.
news items on this last week.
So like when I'm working on other stuff, I'll occasionally have those things in the background, and they had a expert come in who was a cell phone expert. Now, his cell phone expertise was downloading logs and then reading them. So his expertise was figuring out like how many steps, those kind of things. But after the defense was done with their case, the government has an opportunity, or the state has the opportunity to rebut the defense case. And they brought in this expert to explain how he did as an experiment. And so they came in and they said, okay, you're an expert with cell phones. Yes. And the defense is like, okay, well, we went through all this like 2 weeks ago. Yes, he's an expert with cell phones. But it wasn't about the logs. The question was, if you pick up the phone, does it always turn on? Like, does the screen always come on? Because this was a key part of the defense case. If he threw the phone out the window, it would show up in the logs. And he's like, well, if you pick it up violently, it doesn't always come on. And he's correct. But sometimes it does. So the defense is like, well, wait a sec, this guy's not an expert in this. They went through and said, it like, do you have any scientific background? Do you know how this accelerometer works? And he's like, no. But because he was previously an expert, they let all the stuff in. But what he said was very interesting, because the defense is like, okay, so you did all these. He was basically in his office on the weekend, picking up the phone really fast, and then seeing how many times it came on. And they're like, did you video it? No. Do you have any data? Like how many times you picked it up? What force was used? No. And the defense was unable to declare he wasn't an expert, even though there was no scientific basis for any of his experiments. There was no logs on those experiments. Somebody went to
Yeah, well,
jail for the. Now, he deserves to go to jail for a lot of things, but
yeah, from what I
like
hear.
somebody went to jail based on this person being an expert, but all
Hmm.
of their evidence was, there was no way to say he did it wrong or right or anything,
Yeah,
because he didn't actually have any information on it. So
yeah, that's a
it's
problem.
so easy to be deceived because somebody
Oh
is
yeah,
declares himself an expert, and then
yeah.
they go into a topic that they're not actually an expert in.
Hmm. Well, one of the problems there is the lack of data in the critical area of interest. So if you've done your experiments, but there was no video, no records, no, then that counts for very little. It should count for very little if there's no data, because one of the ways in science, one of the primary ways we can investigate a particular paper, even if maybe we don't have the resources to reproduce the experiment, is to actually examine the data very closely to see how comprehensive it is and so forth. Now, in this case, if you're cherry picking the data, that is, you can present a lot of data in this stuff over here, but on this key point over here, you have no data. You might have done your experiment, but you just didn't have the data. You're done. Like I wouldn't even attempt to submit a paper for publication if I had no data to back this up. It's you're just setting yourself up for big time fail. But there's also a second problem in here, and that is experts. So, for example, in Christianity and theological discussions, somebody will say, okay, and you'll run into this anywhere. You will run it into court, in government all the time, in the media. So this expert will say this over here, and this expert will say the opposite over here. So people will say, who am I to believe? How can I possibly know who to believe when
Well,
the
the one
experts
that backs up my
themselves are
worldview. If
and
I have a
often that's the
worldview,
case.
that's what I want to. I'll pick the expert that tells me what I want to
Yeah.
hear.
It's called confirmation bias, where what confirms your worldview is what you're biased towards accepting, and that expert over there. Now, the problem is the expert over there you rejected may actually have the real story, and the expert that you've embraced over here may just be telling you what you want to hear. So that we have, personally, to me, I've been in the academic world long enough that when somebody says this expert over here says such and such, doesn't mean a hill of beans to me. I could care less. That the word expert carries zero credibility in my mind. It's what the expert's going to say, the kind of data that they got to back up what they're saying, the kind of logic that they're using.